The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty plains of New Mexico territory as Samuel Hartwell guided his horse through the mesquite brush. At 52, Sam had spent more years alone than he cared to count, his weathered hands and sun, carved face telling the story of a man who had learned to find solace in solitude. His small ranch sat nestled in a valley between red rock mesas, far enough from civilization that he could go weeks without seeing another soul. Sam had chosen this isolation deliberately. After losing his wife Sarah and their unborn child to fever 7 years ago, he found that the vast emptiness of the frontier matched the hollow ache in his chest. The land demanded everything from a man, but asked no questions about his past or his pain. Here, among the sage and the silence, he could exist without the weight of sympathy or the burden of explaining why he preferred the company of cattle to people. This particular morning, he was tracking 3 head of cattle that had wandered off during the night. The trail led him further east than he usually ventured, into territory that bordered Apache land. The government had drawn lines on maps, declaring which areas belonged to the reservation and which were open to settlers, but the Apache had their own understanding of boundaries, one that predated any white man's claim. As Sam crested a low hill, following the faint impressions of hoofprints in the sandy soil, he spotted something that made him pull sharply on the reins. His horse, a steady mare named Patience, snorted and stepped sideways, sensing her rider's sudden tension. There, hanging from the twisted branches of an ancient cottonwood tree, was a small figure. Sam's heart hammered against his ribs as he approached. It was a young Apache girl, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She wore a simple buckskin dress, and her feet were bare. A crude wooden sign hung around her neck, the letters carved deep into the wood and blackened with what looked like charcoal. The words on the sign hit Sam like a physical blow. EPTJU be a warmanji. For a long moment, Sam sat frozen in his saddle, staring at the terrible scene before him. The girl's face was peaceful, almost serene, but the violence of her death was written in the rope marks around her neck and the way her small body hung limp and still. Someone had done this deliberately, coldly, and then left her here as a message. Sam dismounted slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. He had seen death before, plenty of it. But there was something about the deliberate cruelty of this act that made his stomach turn. The girl couldn't have been much older than his own child would have been, had Sarah lived to give birth. The thought cut through him like a blade, sharp and unexpected. He reached up and carefully lifted the girl down from the tree, surprised by how light she was in his arms. Her skin was cold but not yet rigid, which meant she hadn't been dead long. As he laid her gently on the ground, he noticed something that made him look closer. Around her wrist was a simple bracelet woven from sweetgrass and decorated with small blue beads. It was the kind of thing a mother might make for her daughter, a token of love and protection that had failed to save her. Sam knelt beside the girl's body, removing his hat out of respect. He had lived on this frontier long enough to know the hatred that existed between the Apache and the white settlers. There had been raids and reprisals, violence that fed on itself until it seemed like it might never end. But looking at this child, he couldn't see an enemy or a threat. He saw only a young life cut short by hatred and fear. The sound of approaching horses made Sam look up sharply. 3 riders were coming over the hill, moving at a steady pace. As they drew closer, Sam could see they were white men, probably ranchers or drifters. The leader was a tall man with a thick mustache and cold eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His name was Jacob Morse, and Sam knew him by reputation if not personally. Morse owned a larger spread to the south and was known for his harsh treatment of anyone who got in his way. Well, Morse said as he reined in his horse. Looks like someone found our little message. His voice carried a note of satisfaction that made Sam's jaw clench. Your message? Sam asked, getting to his feet slowly. He was careful to keep his voice level, but his hand drifted instinctively toward the Colt revolver on his hip. That's right, Morse replied, spitting into the dust. Apache been getting too comfortable lately, thinking they can take what they want from honest folks. Figure it's time they learned there's consequences for their actions. The other 2 men chuckled, but there was a nervous edge to their laughter. One of them, a younger man with sandy hair, kept glancing at the girl's body with something that might have been regret. The third man, older and scarred, watched Sam with the calculating gaze of someone who had killed before and would again if necessary. She's just a child, Sam said quietly. Apache child grows up to be an Apache warrior, Morse replied coldly, or an Apache squaw who births more warriors. Best to handle the problem before it gets worse. Sam felt something dark and angry rising in his chest, a fury that he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. There's no problem here that justifies murdering a child. Morse's eyes narrowed. You got a soft spot for savages, Hartwell? That's what they're calling you, isn't it? The hermit who lives up in the rocks talking to his cattle instead of decent folks. I'm decent folk, Sam said, his voice growing harder. Decent enough to know the difference between justice and murder. The tension in the air grew thick as smoke. The sandy-haired young man shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, while the scarred man's hand moved closer to his gun. Morse just smiled, but it was the kind of smile that promised trouble. You planning to do something about it? Morse asked. 3 against 1 ain't good odds, even for a man with your reputation. Sam knew his reputation, earned during his younger days when he'd worked as a lawman in Kansas. He'd been fast with a gun and faster with his fists, but that was before Sarah, before he'd learned that some victories cost more than defeats. Now, standing over the body of a murdered child, he felt those old instincts stirring again. Maybe not, Sam said carefully. But I'm not the only one who's going to have something to say about this. Apache find out what happened to one of their children. They're going to want answers, and they're going to want blood. Morse's smile faded. Let them come. We'll be ready. Will you? Sam asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the kind of men who only fight when the odds are stacked in your favor. Kill a child and call it justice. Real brave. The scarred man's face flushed red. You calling us cowards. I'm calling you what you are, Sam replied evenly. Men who hang children from trees and think it makes them strong. The young man with sandy hair finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. Maybe we should go, Mr. Morse. We've made our point. We'll go when I say we go. Morse snapped, never taking his eyes off Sam. But you're right about one thing, Hartwell. This is going to bring trouble. Question is, which side are you going to be on when it comes? Sam looked down at the girl's body, then back at Morse. I'm on the side that doesn't murder children. For a moment, it seemed like the confrontation might escalate into violence. The scarred man's hand hovered over his gun, and Sam could feel the familiar tightness in his chest that came before a fight. But then Morse raised his hand slightly and the moment passed. Come on, boys, Morse said, turning his horse. We've wasted enough time here. He looked back at Sam one more time. You'd better think real careful about what you do next, Hartwell. This country's got no place for Apache lovers. The 3 men rode away, leaving Sam alone with the dead girl. He watched them disappear over the hill, then turned his attention back to the terrible task at hand. The child deserved better than to be left here for the vultures and coyotes. She deserved a proper burial. Dignity in death, even if she'd been denied it in her final moments. Sam carefully wrapped the girl's body in his spare blanket, lifting her gently onto his horse. The wooden sign he left hanging from the tree, though every instinct told him to burn it. If the Apache came looking for answers, they would need to see what had been done. The ride back to his ranch felt longer than usual, the weight of the girl's body behind him a constant reminder of the cruelty that men could inflict on each other. Sam had seen enough of war and violence to know that hatred was like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path and leaving only ash behind. But he had also learned that sometimes a single act of decency could be like rain on that fire, not enough to put it out entirely, but enough to keep it from spreading. Back at his ranch, Sam chose a spot on a small hill overlooking the valley, a place where the morning sun would always find it. He spent the better part of the day digging a grave, his hands blistering on the shovel handle. As he worked, he found himself thinking about Sarah and the child they'd never had, about the dreams that had died with them and the emptiness that had filled his life since. When everything was ready, Sam laid the girl down with as much care as he could manage. He didn't know her customs, but he did his best to be gentle and respectful, slipping her bracelet back onto her wrist and smoothing her hair the way he imagined her mother might have done. Then he stood in silence for a while, hoping, quietly, that wherever she was now she'd finally find the peace she never had in life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Sam finished marking the grave with a simple wooden cross. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and it was done with respect. He stood there for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen across the valley, thinking about choices and consequences, and the weight of doing what was right. The next morning brought visitors. Sam was tending to his horses when he saw them coming, a small group of Apache warriors riding slowly toward his ranch. His first instinct was to reach for his rifle, but something in their approach made him pause. They weren't coming for a fight, they were coming for answers. The leader was an older man with silver threading through his long black hair. His face was weathered like old leather, marked by years of sun and wind and hardship. He wore traditional dress but carried a modern rifle, a reminder that the Apache had adapted to survive in a changing world. Behind him rode 4 younger men, their faces grave and watchful. Sam stepped out of the barn, his hands visible and empty. The Apache leader raised his hand in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. When he spoke, his English was careful but clear. "I am Many Horses," he said. "I look for my granddaughter. She did not come home." The simple words hit Sam harder than any accusation could have. This wasn't just an Apache child, she was someone's granddaughter, someone's beloved family member. The grief in the old man's eyes was unmistakable, the same grief that Sam had carried for 7 years. "I found her," Sam said quietly. "I'm sorry." Many Horses closed his eyes for a moment, his shoulders sagging as if a great weight had settled on them. When he opened them again, there was pain there, but also a terrible resolve. "Where?" he asked. Sam told him about the cottonwood tree, about the sign, about the 3 men who had claimed responsibility. He didn't spare any details, knowing that the truth, however painful, was what the old man deserved. As he spoke, he watched the other Apache warriors, seeing their faces harden with each word. When Sam finished, Many Horses was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "What did you do?" "I buried her," Sam said. "Up on the hill there. I tried to do it right, but I don't know your customs. If you want to move her, to bury her properly, I understand." Many Horses looked toward the hill where the simple wooden cross stood against the sky. "You did not leave her for the animals." "No," Sam said. "She deserved better than that." "The men who did this, you know them?" Sam nodded. "Jacob Morse and 2 others. They have a spread about 10 miles south of here." One of the younger warriors said something in Apache, his voice angry and urgent. Many Horses held up his hand, and the young man fell silent, though his eyes continued to burn with rage. "My grandson wants blood," Many Horses said. "He loved his sister very much." "I understand," Sam said, and he meant it. If someone had killed Sarah, he would have wanted blood too. But more killing won't bring her back. "No," Many Horses agreed. "But it might stop others from hanging Apache children from trees." Sam couldn't argue with that logic, but he also knew where it led. If you kill Morse and his men, the army will come, more Apache will die, more children will die, and if we do nothing, white men will think Apache children are easy prey. The truth of it hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire. Sam understood the impossible position that Many Horses was in, caught between the need for justice and the need to protect his people. It was the kind of choice that had no good answers, only consequences. "There might be another way," Sam said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we could make sure that what happened to your granddaughter becomes known? What if we could make sure that people understand it was murder, not justice?" Many Horses frowned. "White man's law does not protect Apache children." "Maybe not," Sam admitted, "but there are decent people in this territory, people who would be horrified by what happened. If they knew the truth, they might demand justice. And if they do not," Sam met the old man's eyes, "then you do what you have to do, and I won't stand in your way." It was a gamble, and they both knew it. But Many Horses seemed to consider the proposal seriously. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "1 week," he said. "If white man's justice does not come, Apache justice will." Sam extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Many Horses shook it. The gesture felt significant, a bridge built across a chasm of mistrust and hatred. It might not hold, but it was a start. Over the next few days, Sam rode hard to reach the territorial capital, pushing himself and his horse to the limit. The story he had to tell was not an easy one, and he knew that many people would prefer not to hear it. But he also knew that silence in the face of evil was its own kind of sin. The territorial governor was a political man who weighed every word carefully, but even he seemed shaken by Sam's account of the murdered child. The local newspaper editor was more receptive, especially when Sam showed him the crude wooden sign that he'd retrieved from the cottonwood tree. "This is barbaric," the editor said, examining the sign with disgust. "Absolutely barbaric." "It is," Sam agreed. "And if nothing is done about it, it's going to get worse. The Apache are ready to go to war over this, and I can't say I blame them. The story ran on the front page of the territorial newspaper, with a headline that read Apache killed Malbaloed. The editor didn't spare any details, describing the scene at the cottonwood tree and the callous words of the men responsible. The article called for immediate action by territorial authorities and condemned the killing as an act of cowardice that shames every decent citizen. The response was swift and dramatic. Letters poured into the newspaper office, most expressing outrage at the murder. A group of prominent citizens demanded that the territorial marshal investigate immediately. Even some of the local ranchers, men who had little love for the Apache, spoke out against the killing of a child. Within 3 days, Marshal Thomas Brennan arrived at Jacob Morse's ranch with a warrant for his arrest. Morse didn't go quietly, raging about Apache sympathizers and claiming that he'd done nothing wrong. But the evidence was overwhelming, and public opinion had turned decisively against him. The trial was held in the territorial courthouse, a simple wooden building that had never seen a case quite like this one. Sam testified about finding the girl's body and about his confrontation with Morse and his men. The wooden sign was entered as evidence, its crude message serving as a stark reminder of the hatred that had motivated the crime. Many horses also testified, speaking with quiet dignity about his granddaughter, about her love of horses and her skill at weaving baskets. His words painted a picture of a real child, not the faceless enemy that Morse had tried to make her into. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a verdict of guilty. Morse was sentenced to hang, while his 2 accomplices received lengthy prison terms. As the judge read the sentence, Sam caught sight of many horses in the courtroom gallery. The old man's face was impassive, but Sam thought he saw a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. After the trial, Sam and many horses met outside the courthouse. The Apache leader looked older, worn down by grief and the weight of his responsibilities. Justice, many horses said, the word heavy with meaning. Of a sort, Sam replied. Won't bring her back, though? No? But maybe other children will be safer. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 men from different worlds who had found common ground in the face of tragedy. Finally, you did a good thing, Sam Hartwell. My granddaughter's spirit can rest now. I hope so, Sam said. I hope we all can. As the weeks passed, Sam found that something had changed in him. The encounter with the murdered girl had cracked open the shell of isolation he'd built around himself, forcing him to confront the fact that he was still part of the world, still responsible to it in some way. The pain of losing Sarah would always be with him, but it no longer seemed to define him entirely. He began making trips to town more often, not just for supplies but to check on the widow Henderson, whose husband had died in a mining accident, and to help young Billy Morrison learn to read. Small gestures, perhaps, but they felt significant to a man who had spent years avoiding human connection. One evening, as Sam sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, he heard horses approaching. His hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but he relaxed when he saw who it was. Many horses rode alone this time, his face peaceful in the dying light. I brought something, the old man said, dismounting from his horse. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small woven basket, the kind that Apache women made to carry food or water. She made this, many horses said, holding out the basket, before she died. Her grandmother was teaching her. Sam took the basket carefully, feeling its weight in his hands. It was beautifully made, the reeds woven in intricate patterns that seemed to catch and hold the light. It was a work of art, created by a child who would never grow up to become a master weaver. I cannot keep it, many horses said quietly. Too much pain. But you understood her worth. You gave her dignity when others saw only an enemy. Please, you keep it. Sam felt his throat tighten with emotion. I'm honored, he managed to say. Many horses nodded, then looked out across the valley where the girl was buried. She liked this place, he said. When she was small, she would come here to watch the horses. She said they were free here. She can rest here as long as I'm alive to tend the grave, Sam promised. And after? Sam considered the question. I'll make sure it's written down somewhere so people remember. So they know what happened here and why it mattered. Many horses seemed satisfied with that answer. As he prepared to leave, he turned back to Sam one more time. You are a good man, Sam Hartwell. In a world with much darkness, you chose to be light. After many horses rode away, Sam sat on his porch holding the basket, thinking about choices and consequences, about darkness and light. The girl's death had been a terrible thing, But it had also revealed something important about the capacity for both cruelty and compassion that existed in every human heart. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sam made his way up the hill to the small grave. He placed the basket beside the wooden cross, a final gift from a grandfather to his granddaughter, and a symbol of the beauty that could exist even in the midst of sorrow. Standing there in the quiet of the evening, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the empty peace of isolation, but the deeper peace that came from knowing he had done right by another human being, regardless of the color of her skin or the circumstances of her birth. The weeks that followed brought unexpected changes to Sam's life. Word of his testimony and his role in bringing Morse to justice had spread throughout the territory, earning him respect from quarters he'd never expected. But more importantly, it had opened doors in his own heart that he'd thought were sealed forever. One morning in late autumn, as Sam was mending fence on the eastern boundary of his property, he heard the sound of children's laughter carried on the wind. Curious, he followed the sound to its source and found a remarkable sight: a group of Apache and white children playing together near the stream that marked the border between his land and the reservation. Among them was Many Horse's grandson, the young warrior who had wanted blood for his sister's death. But now he was showing a group of white children how to weave grass into ropes, his anger replaced by something that looked almost like joy. Watching over them was a white woman Sam recognized as Mary Collins, the new schoolteacher who had arrived from back east with ideas about education that some folks found radical. "Mr. Hartwell," Mary called out when she spotted him, "I hope you don't mind us using your stream. The children were so hot, and the water here is so clear." "Don't mind at all," Sam replied, tipping his hat. "Looks like they're having a good time." Mary smiled, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. "They are. It's amazing how quickly children can move past the prejudices of their parents when given the chance. Little Maria there has been teaching the Apache children English songs, while Joseph has been learning traditional stories." Sam watched the children play, struck by how natural their friendship seemed. No one had told them they were supposed to be enemies. They had simply found common ground in the universal language of childhood. It was a lesson that their elders could learn from, if they were willing. "Miss Collins," Sam said after a moment, "would you and the children like to come up to the house for some cool water, and maybe some of my wife's apple preserves? I've got more than I can use, and it seems a shame to let it go to waste." The invitation surprised even Sam himself. He hadn't entertained guests in years, hadn't wanted to. But something about seeing these children together, Apache and white, laughing and learning from each other, made him want to be part of it. The afternoon that followed was one of the most pleasant Sam could remember in years. The children explored his ranch with endless curiosity, marveling at his cattle and asking endless questions about ranch life. Many Horse's grandson, whose name was Running Wolf, showed particular interest in Sam's horses, demonstrating a natural skill that reminded Sam of himself at that age. "Your grandfather was right about you loving horses," Sam told the boy as they watched his mare Patience nuzzle the child's outstretched hand. Running Wolf looked up at Sam with solemn dark eyes. "Grandfather says you are a good man. He says you gave my sister honor in death." The simple words hit Sam harder than he'd expected. "She deserved that honor," he said quietly. "She deserved a lot more than she got. Grandfather says the spirits are pleased with what you did. He says my sister's spirit told him she is happy where she rests." Sam felt his throat tighten with emotion. Whether or not one believed in spirits speaking to the living, the comfort that Many Horses had found in that belief was real and precious. "I'm glad," Sam managed to say. As the day wore on, Sam found himself drawn into conversations with Mary Collins about her teaching methods and her hopes for the future of the territory. She was an educated woman with strong opinions about justice and equality, but she wore her convictions lightly, without the rigid righteousness that so often accompanied such beliefs. "You know," she said as they watched the children play, "what you did, testifying against those men. It's changed things around here. People are talking about it, thinking about it. Some of them are starting to question attitudes they've held their whole lives." "I just did what needed doing," Sam replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "That's exactly what makes it so powerful," Mary said. "You didn't do it for glory or recognition. You did it because it was right. That kind of moral courage is rare, and when people see it, it inspires them to examine their own consciences." Sam wasn't sure he deserved such credit, But he was beginning to understand that his actions had indeed set something in motion, a small shift in the way people thought about their Apache neighbors. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As winter approached, Sam found himself making regular trips to town, not just for supplies but to help with various community projects. He assisted in building a new schoolhouse that would serve both white and Apache children, worked on improving the road that connected the reservation to the main settlement, and even helped organize a harvest festival that brought the two communities together. The festival was a particular success, with Apache families sharing traditional foods and dances while white families contributed their own specialties. There were tense moments, to be sure, and not everyone was comfortable with the mixing of cultures. But the children led the way, their easy friendship breaking down barriers that adults found harder to cross. During the festival, Sam had a long conversation with many horses about the future. The old man was cautiously optimistic about the changes he was seeing, but he was also realistic about the challenges that lay ahead. Change comes slowly. Many horses said as they watched the children dance together around a bonfire. Like the seasons, it cannot be rushed. But once it begins, it is hard to stop. I hope you're right, Sam said. I hope what happened to your granddaughter wasn't for nothing. Nothing is for nothing if we learn from it. Many horses replied. She died because of hatred, but her death taught people about love. That is a powerful thing. As winter settled over the territory, Sam found his ranch becoming an unexpected gathering place. Apache families would stop by when traveling through the area, sharing news and stories. White neighbors began visiting more frequently, drawn by Sam's reputation for fairness and his willingness to listen to different perspectives. One snowy evening in December, Sam was surprised by a knock at his door. He opened it to find Running Wolf standing on his porch, shivering in the cold but smiling broadly. "Mr. Sam," the boy said in carefully practiced English, "Grandfather sends greetings. He says to tell you that my sister comes to him in dreams now, and she is always smiling." Sam invited the boy in, wrapping him in a warm blanket and fixing him hot coffee. As they sat by the fire, Running Wolf told Sam about his life on the reservation, about his hopes of one day becoming a teacher like Miss Collins, and about his determination to help build bridges between the Apache and white communities. "My sister believed in peace," Running Wolf said, his young face serious in the firelight. "She used to say that hatred was like a poison that made everyone sick. She wanted to be a healer when she grew up, to help people get better." Sam felt a familiar ache in his chest at the reminder of all the girl might have become. But alongside the sadness was something else, a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt since Sarah's death. The girl's dream of healing could still live on through the work that others did in her memory. "Maybe you can be that healer," Sam told Running Wolf. "Maybe you can help heal the hurt between our peoples." The boy nodded solemnly. "I will try, Mr. Sam. For my sister, I will try." As spring returned to the territory, Sam began work on a project that had been taking shape in his mind for months. With help from Mary Collins and several other community members, he established a small school and clinic on his property, positioned strategically between the white settlement and the Apache reservation. The school offered classes in both English and Apache, with curriculum that included traditional skills alongside modern subjects. The clinic was staffed by a young doctor from back east who had volunteered to serve the frontier communities, treating patients regardless of their race or ability to pay. The project wasn't without its critics. Some white settlers accused Sam of being an Indian lover who was betraying his own kind. Some Apache viewed the school with suspicion, seeing it as another attempt to force their children to abandon traditional ways. But gradually, as people saw the practical benefits of the services offered, opposition began to fade. Many Horses was among the school's strongest supporters, serving as a cultural consultant and helping to develop the bilingual curriculum. His presence lent legitimacy to the project in the eyes of the Apache community, while his growing friendship with Sam helped ease tensions among the white settlers. "You have built something good here," many Horses told Sam one afternoon as they watched Apache and white children learning together in the classroom. "My granddaughter would be proud." Sam felt a deep satisfaction at those words. The school and clinic weren't just buildings. They were symbols of what could be accomplished when people chose cooperation over conflict, understanding over hatred. As the first anniversary of the girl's death approached, Sam felt compelled to do something to mark the occasion. Working with many Horses and Mary Collins, He organized a memorial service that would honor not just the murdered child, but all the victims of the cycle of violence that had plagued the territory. The service was held at the girl's grave site, with people from both communities gathering on the hillside to pay their respects. Many horses spoke about his granddaughter's love of life and her dreams of peace. Sam read from the Bible, choosing passages about justice and reconciliation. Mary Collins led the children in a song they had learned together, their voices rising pure and clear in the mountain air. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Running Wolf stepped forward with a small woven basket, identical to the one his sister had made. He placed it gently beside the wooden cross, then spoke in his clear young voice. "My sister wanted to be a healer," he said. "She wanted to help people. I think she would be happy to know that her death helped heal some of the hurt between our peoples. I think she would want us to keep working for peace, so that no other children have to die because of hatred." As the ceremony concluded, Sam noticed something remarkable. Apache and white families weren't separating into distinct groups as they usually did. Instead, they were talking together, sharing memories and hopes, finding common ground in their shared humanity. Later that evening, as Sam sat alone by the grave in the gathering dusk, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this place. A year ago, he had been a bitter, isolated man, cut off from the world by grief and anger. The discovery of the murdered child had forced him out of that isolation, compelling him to take a stand for justice and human dignity. In doing so, he had found something he thought he'd lost forever: a sense of purpose, a reason to engage with the world and its struggles. The girl's death had been a tragedy, but it had also been a catalyst for change, a spark that had ignited something beautiful and lasting. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sam heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Mary Collins approaching, carrying a lantern to light her way. "I thought you might like some company," she said, settling down beside him on the grass. "I'm grateful for it," Sam replied, and he meant it. Over the past year, Mary had become more than just a colleague in their shared projects. She had become a friend, and if Sam was honest with himself, perhaps something more. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. Finally, Mary spoke. "Do you think she knows?" she asked softly. "Do you think she knows what her death accomplished?" Sam considered the question. "I hope so," he said finally. "I hope she knows that her life mattered, that her death wasn't meaningless. I hope she knows that children like Running Wolf are growing up in a better world because of what happened here." "I think she does," Mary said. "I think love like that, sacrifice like that, it doesn't just disappear, it becomes part of something larger, something that goes on long after we're gone." As they made their way back to the house, Sam felt a deep sense of contentment settle over him. The frontier was still a challenging place, full of hardships and uncertainties. But it was also a place where individuals could make a difference, where a single act of courage could echo across the years and change the world in small but significant ways. The girl buried on the hill had died because of hatred, but her death had ultimately served the cause of love and understanding. That was her legacy, and Sam was determined to honor it for as long as he lived. In a world often divided by fear and prejudice, he had learned that there was always room for those who chose to build bridges instead of walls, to heal instead of harm, to love instead of hate. The frontier was changing slowly but surely, and Sam Hartwell was proud to be part of that change. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between sunset and full darkness, he could almost hear the sound of a young Apache girl laughing as she ran free with the wind across the endless plains, her spirit finally at peace in a world that was learning, one heart at a time, to choose compassion over cruelty.